pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Mrs. Angelique Everett, excused. Mrs. Gadsden. Here. Mrs. Galbo. Here. Mr. Garnett.
Here.
Mr. Munoz.
Here.
Ms. Patchen.
Here.
Mr. White.
Here.
Mr. Zoff.
Here.
Mrs. Thompson. Here. Dr. Walkley, would you review the fire exits?
The fire exits are on the back wall directly in front of us.
Would you like to introduce our workshop today?
Yeah. For our workshop tonight, there's going to be a presentation about student performance and the state visit through the state review, and then our response to the feedback that we received from the state. And then we will also have a presentation on the tax warrant. Mrs. Kellogg will be presenting with me, and then Mrs. Corley. Okay, I'd like to start this evening by sharing with you some information that is on our front web page that I will be referring to over here in the right-hand corner under featured items. There is an article about that the school district conducted the New York State required school and district review and follow-up planning. So you can find that article right here, and once you open it, there are links to the diagnostic tool, which I will refer to, which is the state rubric that they use when they do a school visit. You will also be able to see the feedback that both the high school and district received. Tonight you will see a little piece of that, but you will not see all of it. It's quite a lengthy document. And there is information there about what they observed and their findings and also recommendations. And in addition, we have also posted this year's DSIP and SEP, which are two different plans that we need to do required by the state in response to the state report. So those items are there for your review at a later time. So tonight I'm going to take a little look at the Beacon High School and the feedback that Beacon High School has received as a focus school. And it will explain a little bit about the state of where we are. The purpose of the presentation this evening is to shine some light, to give some more data behind the teacher transfers. It's to level the playing field with data so that people who are attending this evening or watching this are able to see some of the data that we've been looking at. It is also to share a perspective of what it is that we want for Beacon students. We are also required by the state to present the focus school and the focus district information. And as I said tonight, we will only really be sharing the structure and the ratings as we are required to do. This information has been embargoed until just after the last board meeting. It was only about a week or 2 weeks ago that they have released this information. It is also going to allow you, if you choose, to go on the website and delve deeper into the school and district review. And you will have access to the state findings and recommendations. The word recommendation is put in quotations. On their paper, they write recommendations. As they reviewed the information with us, I asked them if they were truly recommendations, if we had a choice of implementing or not implementing recommendations. And they said, no, you do not have a choice. You are required to implement these recommendations. I said, well, why don't you call them directives? And the state said, well, we call them recommendations, but you really don't have a choice. As I showed you, the information is on the Beacon webpage. A great number of years ago, there was a book that was very popular, written by Jim Collins. It was called Good to Great. And in that book, there's a quote which says, "The good is the enemy of the great." And when I first read that quote, I had to spend some time thinking a little bit about what that meant. And after I thought about it for a while, it became clear to me that often when we are good at what we do, when we believe that we are good enough, we become complacent sometimes with where we are. Sometimes the good prevents us from continuing to think about and continuously improve because it's good enough. And I've even heard sometimes people say, well, that's good enough for who it's for. And so as I thought about that, I thought that that was a good quote to keep in mind, because there is a difference between good and great. And it's only by a few degrees sometimes that makes us great. So the question that I'm asking is, how much is good enough? When we look at performance data, when we look at state reviews, what is good and how much is good enough? For example, let's say that you are requiring some very serious surgery. You're going to need to have Okay. All right. If we're checking on occupancy, if you needed to have this very serious surgery, and you had a choice, you have two doctors, two surgeons that you can choose from. They both graduated from the same school. One of the surgeons received an 80%. That was their report or their level of achievement when they left the school. And the other one was 100%. And so the question that I would ask you to think about for a minute is, which surgeon would you choose? Considering, let's pretend that the way that they interact with you is very similar, they have similar values, etc. So which surgeon would you choose? I'm going to begin today with Regents results, and you're going to be looking at some trend data. Each slide that I will show you is for a different content area that is connected to a Regents exam. In most cases, you will be looking at 11 years of results for each Regents test given, with the exception of math, because less years, the math exams have changed over time, so there are less years. There's not 11 years consecutively of the same, at least the same named assessment. And we do know that the Regents have changed over time. You're going to see a line graph with two lines. The top line, which will always be in blue, represents the total percentage of students who passed the test in that subject area that particular year. And that would include any students who were at 65 to 100%. The bottom line in black represents the percentage of students who pass the test at 85% or above. Now, that 85% is not in addition to the 65 to 100%. They're pulled out of the 100% to look at the number or percents of students who are passing the test with distinction, is how the state titles it. So an 85 or above is felt to be a higher level of achievement. You'll be seeing the average percentage of students that pass the assessment for the number of years recorded. You will see the average percentage of students who passed with distinction at 85% or above. And the data goes up to what is our most current data that has been released from the state, and that is the 2013-14 school year. This year is not yet officially available from the state. The graphs start at the year 2003-2004 is on the left-hand side, and then each year up to 13-14. Okay. What would we like to see? Well, we would like to see upward trends in passing rates. That's what we would like to see. We would like to see a nice trend line that is going up to the right. We would like to see passing rates above 80%, reaching into the 90 or 100%. We would like to see a passing with distinction well above 50% of the students. And if there is a dip in the data, that there is a quick recovery the following year from that dip. As you know, all regions' exams are not the same. They're not always developed by the same people. And sometimes certain years, the test is particularly difficult. Why? What would that mean? What would it mean if we saw these upward trends? Well, it would say that we were working intentionally to continuously improve over time, and that we would understand that change is a process, not an event. Sometimes you don't start at the top. But the idea is, are we continuously improving over time? We would also then perhaps be able to assume, maybe, that principals and teachers were using data-driven decision-making, and they were looking at the system, the teaching learning system, and improving results. Here's the first graph. It is physics. And again, we're looking at over an 11-year period. What we can see is 11 years ago in 03-04, there was a 100% passing rate. And then we can see how the graph looks. But what we do see right now is we're seeing an upward trend. Just exactly what we want to see. It's above 90%. That's good. We want to see that. And the bottom line, as I mentioned, is looking at the percent of students taken out of the blue line that pass the test at 85 or above. And again, that's approaching just where we want to be, that 50% or more of our students being able to be successful at 85 or above. The 11-year average success rate is 77%, about 77%, and about 1/5 of the students over time are passing with distinction on average. Chemistry. In chemistry, recently we are seeing a downward trend, and our success rate last year was about 53%. Overall, in the 11-year average, we have a success rate of about 66% of our students. And those students at passing with distinction 85 or above is less than 10%. As a matter of fact, the 11-year average passing with distinction is 6.7%. This is living environment. It is approaching 80%. It was about 78% this past year. And the success rate is less than 1/3. Our 11-year average is 78%, and the 11-year average with distinction is less than 20%. Earth Science, our success rate last year was about 70%, and again, about a third of our students were able to pass with distinction. Over time, in the 11-year average, 71% with about 22% success rate at 85 or above. What you begin to see with the blue line on this particular assessment, even though there's some ups and downs, the line itself is rather flat in comparison to the other lines. Statistically, what that tells us is that the system is stable, that teachers are able to produce about the same results year after year. In some of our other graphs, what we see are great variation in the assessment. Now, that could be because of the assessment, and maybe the assessment is changing over time. But it definitely, we'd have to take a deeper look at what's happening there, but it looks like the system is perhaps not as stable as this other system. With global, our success rate is about 75%, with an 11-year average of about 63. And our distinction, again, is less than a third, but overall about a fifth of our students scoring at 85 or above. U.S. history, above 80%, great, and approaching 50%. The 11-year average is 77, and with distinction, about a third of our students. Here's where you see a difference in the number of years because the assessments changed, and that does not preclude that they haven't changed within the time that you see represented here as well. So for geometry, it was this past year approaching 90%, about 85, with an overall average of 77, with less than 20% passing with distinction, both last year and as average. Algebra 2 trig, less years, 5 years. The success rate this past year, about 65%. Over the average, 51%. And last year, right about 20%, right along with the average, passing with distinction. Integrated algebra, about 75% success rate last year, with less than 10% at 85 or above. Our 7-year average is 69%, and passing with distinction is less than 10%. And finally, the comprehensive English exam. This past year, about 80%, about 20%, about 1/5 of the students are at 85 or above. The overall average for 11 years is 31%. At 85 or above, with an 82% at between 65 and 100. So, our goal is a little bit higher than our achievement is right now. Our goal is to be in the 90%, 90 to 100%, and with distinction, above 50%. We're not there yet. And what these graphs tell us is that our Regents passing rate is too low. Our students are as smart as any other district. I will place our students against any other district or any similar district who has the same challenges that we have in this district. Our students deserve to be challenged at their level of capacity, and I believe that our students can do better, and I believe that we deserve to provide that to them. Our course rigor is too low. We do not have enough students passing at 85 or above. Now, how does the state accountability compound our challenges when we look at student achievement? There are a couple of measures here You don't need to understand the whole graph, but there are a couple of measures here that are really important. Starting with the green arrow in the left-hand corner, we're looking for groups of students now who made AYP. AYP is a target that is set, a number target that is set by the state, and we earn points for how well we do on our assessments. This happens to be for secondary level mathematics, and the second measure, the second green arrow, is that 95%. Do we test 95% of our students? It's an important measure because it is one of our accountability measures that keeps us on or helps us get off the focus list for the high school. In pink is what we scored. It is the number of points that we earned that particular year. And the EAMO is what our state target was. The last column is something called safe harbor. If you don't make the state target, they give you a second chance by presenting sometimes, not always, sometimes a lower target. So this particular year, we actually had a good success rate, When we begin to disaggregate the data, what we see is that we are not making our AYP targets. In this particular year, all of the students did not make their target. As you see in the pink column, we earned 110 points, but our target was 129 points. And our second chance was 117. So the state said we did not make AYP. When we look at our African American students, yes, we did make AYP. We made it by 1 point, 92 as opposed to the state target, which was 91. For our Hispanic students, we did not make AYP. We earned 91 points, and our state target was 93. Our white students, the group of white students, did not make AYP. Our target from the state was 144 points. We only earned 126. Our students with disabilities, yes, they did make their targets. They were successful that year. They made AYP. And our economically disadvantaged students did not make AYP. Our target was 104, and we scored 91 points. So how do we address this? Well, from the state's point of view, when we don't make AYP, what they tell us is we are not meeting the needs of certain groups of students. And if we continue to not meet needs of certain groups of students over time, then that tells us that we need to look at our system and make changes within the system. The groups that most often, that we see most often that do not make targets are our economically disadvantaged students. That is the highest percentage of any group that does not make targets, and they are our biggest challenge in this particular district. And we tend to not meet their needs in many different areas. To get off the focus list, we need to make our targets. And we need to make targets over a 2-year period, 2 years in a row, and we also need to test 95% of the students 2 years in a row. And for the high school, we also take a look at graduation rate. What does the state say? The state, as required by the commissioner's regulations, each focus district will participate annually in a diagnostic review using a diagnostic tool of quality indicators. That is the tool that I mentioned to you that is just a click away once you go to our web page. And I put the click there as well. This particular tool was developed by the state based on a number of different assessments. and they took what the state determined to be the best assessments that they had at hand at that time. Every focus district and every focus school every year uses this particular rubric to assess the district. Sometimes that is a state-led assessment, as we had this past year, and sometimes that is a district-led assessment, but you still use the same tools. What are you going to see? Well, like the Regents test, you're going to see the results of trend data. And again, you're looking at the results of the teaching learning system when we look at the information that the state gave us. Also, like the Regents test data, you are looking at systems that have gotten to where they are over time. This is not something that just happened last year. Oh, by surprise, oops, here we are. We have been receiving feedback from the state about the high school, actually ever since it was first identified as a focus school, which was the first year that a focus school could be identified. The diagnostic tool has 6 big ideas. When you assess a school, the 1.0, and they call them tenets, the big ideas are called tenets. The 1.0 is not assessed at the school level because 1.0 looks at district leadership and capacity. So the items that we look at using the school tool, the school rubric, and other tools that the state provides, we look at school leader practices and decisions. That's 2.0. 3.0 is the school level curriculum development and support. At 4.0, we look at teacher practice and support from the classroom point of view. In Tenet 5, we look at student social and emotional developmental health. And in Tenet 6, we are looking at family and community engagement. Each of these tenets are broken down. They're broken down, every one of them has a 0.2, a 0.3, a 0.4, a 0.5. And what the 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 represents are practices on the rubric. They are practices that when a school practices in this way, when teachers practice in this way, when administrators practice in this way, that's when they will reach the big idea. So that's what the state is assessing, are the practices across the school and also across the district. We are then rated very much like our students are rated. Every tenet is given an overall rating, and each of those subgroups are given a rating. H is highly effective, and that is, or a 4, a rating of 4. An E stands for effective, which is a rating of 3. D is for developing, which is a rating of 2. And I is ineffective, or a rating of 1. What would we like to see? Well, we'd like to see all the ratings, or at least the vast majority of ratings, at least at an E for effective, or a 3 level. And ideally, down the road, all of our ratings would be H, or highly effective, or 4 level. That's what we would like to see. We also would not like to see ratings less than a D, which stands for developing. We would not like to see any 1 ratings as ineffective. A lot of information here. This is posted on the website. It is in the board docs, and Kelly has posted that this evening, so it is there for your review. I'm very quickly going to review the tenet. The big idea in the tenet for 2.0 is about vision, and it's about creating a culture that leads to success, well-being, and high academic outcomes for all students. We have just seen that we're not really producing high academic outcomes for all of our students. As a matter of fact, in most cases, it's only about 1/3 or 1/5 of our students. Our overall rating for Tenet 2 was a D, and for each of the practices, like having an articulated, understood, and shared vision, or using evidence to improve individual and school-wide practices, for each of those practices, we received a developing rating. Tenet 3.0 looks at school curriculum development and support. What we're looking for is rigorous and coherent curricula across the school and across the district that are appropriately aligned to the Common Core learning standards for all students. And again, we've seen that in our subgroups, we are not, every time we do not make an AYP target, that is an indication to the state that we are not meeting the needs of our students. And we're not maximizing instructional practices that are known to work well in schools. Again, we received a D rating, and in one of the tenets, in one of the practices, 3.4, has a comprehensive plan to create interdisciplinary curricula that integrates the arts, technology, etc. We received an ineffective rating because of the lack of our integrated curriculum. 4.0, teacher practices and support. In this tenet, we are looking to address the gap between what students know and need to learn so that, all students are achieving at high levels and are engaged in the learning and thinking and in achievement. Again, for each practice, we received a developing rating with an overall rating of D for developing. Tenet 5.0, student social emotional developmental health. Here we're looking, have we designed systems and experiences that lead to healthy relationships in schools and a safe, respectful environment that is conducive to learning for all? Again, for all of our practices and our overall rating, we received developing. Finally, family and community engagement. This is about a culture of partnership with families in our community, where we are all working together, the staff and the community, to share in the responsibility for student academic progress and social emotional growth and well-being of our students. Again, we received D ratings. So in summary, let's think about this a little bit. We may not like how the state assesses us. We may not like the testing system. We may not like the school visits. And we may want to say, well, how could the state rate us? They were only here for 3 days. But that is the system, and we have to remember that the state rates all of the focus schools, usually every other year, and there are schools that have been rated effective and as well as highly effective. We were not one of those schools. They did not find the practices that the rubric says are good practices. And this is the way that the state is holding us accountable. And so we need to learn how to produce what it is that the state is looking for. We have seen that our Regent scores could be better, and that our students deserve to achieve at higher levels, and that we are here to serve students. That's why we're here. That's why we got in the profession originally. If you ask any teacher, why did you become a teacher? No teacher is going to say, well, because I have the summers off, because no teacher has summer off, because we're here for kids. Our rigor is low. When we compare our state assessments, our success rate on the regions to national exams, we score lower on national exams than we do on our regions, which makes me believe that the national exams have a little bit higher rigor than the Regents assessment. And I believe that our students deserve to be challenged. and I believe our students deserve to achieve more. We've seen that scoring high on a Regents exam, doing good, isn't enough. It's not enough because we have to meet our state targets. And we are not doing that. We've also seen that the state review team was not satisfied with the practices that they saw here in this district. And their belief is that if we demonstrate those practices, if they are part of our habit, our work habit, then they should be able to walk in any day and see these practices happening in a school district. That is their belief, whether we agree with that or not. And so we have to move on from whether we think that the state was here long enough to assess us or not, take in the feedback that they have given us, and remember that those are results of a system. This is not about good or bad teachers. It's about a system. And the only way we're going to change results is to change the system, to make things different. We see in some of our 11-year trend data that our data is flat. Our system is stable. We continue to produce the same results over time. And so how is it that we would expect to get different results unless we do something differently? It's through our actions in which will change the outcomes that we have. Now, I want to go back. How much is good enough? I want you to think about this. I don't know about you, but I chose the 100% surgeon. That's what I want. I want the surgeon that graduated from school at 100% and nothing less. I don't want an 80% surgeon operating on me. And I want us to think about that in relationship to our success rate and when students graduate and leave our school and they're at less than 85%. Are we satisfied? Is that good enough? Is that good enough to send our students out into the world of work or the world of higher education at less than an 85% success rate? That's what we need to think about, and that's what we need to decide as a group. And the only way that that's going to happen, those things are going to happen, is through changing the system. Mrs. Kellogg is going to talk to us about some of the very exciting plans that have been made this summer through groups of people coming together.
Dr. Walkley, I'd like to ask that we postpone Ms. Kellogg's presentation until we're able to move to another room.
Okay.
This room is way beyond capacity, and for the safety of all of us, we are going to move to the auditorium.
Okay?
The board is we're going to change the meeting and have the board go into executive session so that the transition can happen while we're...
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
We have a motion for executive session.
To adjourn to executive session to review the employment history of a particular individual, and the board will return as soon as possible. Second.
Comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Should we bring our name tags? So if I get in there, and that's how they are.
All right.